Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Beyond Limits show. I am overjoyed to have Alex Andersen on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to this conversation probably for months. She offers such a unique thing that she does. I'm going to let her introduce herself. If you have a pet, this is going to be such a good episode for you. So, with that, welcome Alex to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here as well. This is going to be a super fun conversation. I love chatting about this stuff.
So for everyone, can you tell us who you are, kind of what you do? You are a animal communicator. What does that mean? What does that kind of entail? And like, what is it that you do?
Great question. So yes, I'm a professional animal communicator, and I also teach people how to tap into their own intuitive senses so that they can also communicate with their own pets. And when we talk about being an animal communicator, most people are familiar with mediumship in the psychic or intuitive space. And you can kind of think of it like working with a medium, but instead of communicating with people who have passed on, I focus on animals, both that are here earthside and who have crossed over.
So in that, I mean, this can go for all animals, right? This could go for cats and dogs, but I guess also animal communication with horses. I've seen horses on your feed. I feel like I'm being drawn to horses in the last few months. So technically, this could be even if you have chickens on your farm, like it could be with your chickens, with your sheep, with your cows, with your horses. It's not necessarily just cats and dogs, or I guess birds too, and maybe even fish.
Absolutely. I have talked to everything under the sun, from a goldfish that had actually crossed over to chickens to monkeys, as well as, larger animals like horses. I have 4 of them of my own, and we're in constant communication and conversation together. So everything is available there.
So what do we need to know about animal communication right off the bat? Because I feel like I have a golden retriever named Akasha. She's my heart and soul. Like I feel like I communicate with her. Like we don't need to speak. I look, I know what she's saying. She definitely understands me. She may not come every time I say come, but she'll give me a side eye that's like, I understand what you're saying, but no. So kind of like what to you is it that like that knowing, like what is the animal communication? Are they giving you signs? Are you reading their energy? Like what does that look like or feel like to you? Or perhaps is it depend on the communicator because you spoke to, helping people do it for their own? Is it some people gonna like, oh, I'll just hear, well, not hear it, but you get what I mean, in my head? Or is it like a color thing? Is it kind of like however clairvoyant you are, your clairsenses is how you communicate? Kind of run us through that.
Yeah, great question. So it's all of the above. So
Hmm.
animals, the way that intuitive communication works on in any scale, any level, any niche, any industry, is that our unconscious mind is the ruler of our psychic intuitive senses. So everything that comes in, data and information from our environment, gets funneled through first like our 5 senses. And part of this is because our brain can actually take in anywhere from 200 million bits per second of information to some studies are now showing like billion bits of information per second at a time. And that is way too much information for our conscious mind and our unconscious mind to be able to process. So the way that our bodies work is that all this information comes in and it gets filtered through a bunch of different filters. The first line of defense I always like to call is our 5 senses. And our 5 senses are going to be our visual, our hearing, right, our auditory, our kinesthetic, and then our gustatory and olfactory. So essentially, sense of taste and smell. And that information that's left over then gets filtered through a bunch of other unconscious filters before we even have conscious ability to process that leftover regurgitation that becomes our internal representation of how we view the world. So humans have a ton of filters going on behind the scenes that we're typically completely unaware of. And our psychic information comes through these filters as well, and first goes through at an unconscious level, then the information becomes conscious to us so that we can do something about it. This is why humans sort of have to remember or reawaken their intuitive senses. And we all have senses that we're more apt to working with. So for me, I'm a very visual and auditory person. So I see a lot of images in my mind. I hear a lot of sentences or words as well. Whereas my co-trainer that I brought on years ago, she's very kinesthetic. So her and I work really well together when we teach people because we're exactly the opposite of each other. So she gets more of a sense of knowing, where it's almost like in her mind, it feels like she's replaying a conversation she had days ago. She's not necessarily hearing the words, but it's like she's remembering a memory. And she has a sense of knowing about information that she doesn't know how she knows it. So kinesthetic people can also feel things in their body. So for those of you that really resonate with being an empath, which many of us are, and we feel vibes, right? We go into a room and you can feel that the energy is really high and people are really happy, or perhaps it's really somber. And people who are really kinesthetic are really good at picking up emotions as well as physical feelings from animals. So that's how humans work. We're a little bit different in that way. And of course, mostly because we have our conscious mind at play. Whereas animals don't have a conscious mind. Some species don't have one at all. And so there's no filter on their end that's saying, hey, maybe you should doubt that information, or hey, maybe that's not coming from you, or hey, was that even real? Like we do. This is a very natural skill for them because they have such a wide open, well operating unconscious mind. So their psychic and intuitive stuff is like full blown. They communicate this way through energy. So it's like pictures, words, and feelings. And it's all an energetic transference of that information. So whereas the humans have to learn how to interpret it, animals are very fluid. This is the most natural form of communication for them. In fact, it's required for them, instinctually speaking, when they're out in the wild, right? To keep them surviving, keep them safe. So they can send pictures, words, and feelings sometimes all at once. And yes, at that point, once it's sent to the communicator and we receive it on our end, it is up to our unique lens and how we view and process that information that then becomes the way that we translate it.
So what type of information either do you work with, or what people come to you? Is it like, oh, my dog is sick, or they haven't been behaving themselves, and you're kind of figuring out why? Like, tell me kind of the types of information you tend to get. I know we can probably get anything we want, but what do you see as like, oh, this is the kind of the information we like people seek us out for that I usually like share or need to tap into?
Sure. So every animal communicator has sometimes like their own niche or a field within the
Mm.
umbrella of animal communication that they really like
Oh
to work with.
wow.
Yeah.
I never
So
thought there'd be an umbrella.
I
Yeah.
know. I know. It's actually like it's a very rich industry that I just don't think
Oh,
people know much
amazing.
about.
Yeah.
So I got into animal communication thinking I was going to go work with people in the performance area of horses. So obviously I grew up with horses. I have a deep, tender love for them. And I used to compete when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, this is really fun work. Let's have conversations. I also have a background in neurolinguistics and hypnotherapy, which is why I teach people in a very different way than other teachers you'll find in the industry. So, because of my background there, I have a lot of healing work modalities and unconscious mind reprogramming modalities that I had a passion that, cool, if I can bridge the gap between myself and the animal communication wise, there's no reason, in my opinion, why these same modalities shouldn't work. And so that was the area that I was planning on getting into was let's work with the dog, let's work with the human so that they can unconsciously get in rapport and on the same page, and we can release any limiting beliefs or emotions that are getting in the way of them performing cohesively as a team so that they do better when they're performing. And the universe had different plans for me. I never actually got into that work, but it's still a soft spot for me. What actually I was drawn to was behavioral work. So,
Mm.
which makes sense because that was part of the performance thing for me. That I was like, ooh, let's get everybody on the same page. So I sort of did it in a different fashion. So people come to me oftentimes with aggressive behaviors with dogs, cats that are starting new behaviors. And I've had really extreme behavioral work that I have worked with dogs who are now going through the court system because of incidents that they had,
Oh
so that we
wow.
can try and essentially rehab them. And so that's my lane of expertise. I love
Yeah.
that work so much. And yeah, I
That's
feel like that's also something people don't know very much about. I think people oftentimes, if I had a nickel for every DM I had with this request, I would be rich. But people oftentimes will reach out to me and just say, like, hey, can you just ask my dog to stop fighting his sister or stop? barking at
Mhm.
the mailman or whatever the case may be. And I'm trying to educate people that just because an animal communicator can ask them to stop doing something doesn't mean that they will. Just like you were talking about with your dog, even though I call her doesn't mean she's going to come, right? Like they're unique beings, they're sovereign beings, and they make their own choices and decisions. And a lot of the times they're not neurologically equipped to follow the command that we're asking them to do because it's never been a habit. So it's like their body, their instincts, their neurology doesn't know how to participate in that behavior that we're asking them to change. So oftentimes when I'm working more intense behavioral cases, we're bringing in a trainer so that we can get the animal and the human on board with the plan. We're talking about it. I figure out what the animal's motivator is. Like, cool, if we work on your reactivity, you'll be able to have so many more adventures with your parent, right? Like, we're having a cohesive conversation so that everyone has on the same page, the motivators are lined out, and then we bring in somebody who can actually help facilitate the behavioral habit at home and reinforce that.
I wish I had you when she was a puppy, let me tell you. You would have saved me a lot of tears, a lot of frustration, a lot of not being listened to, not understanding. Because she was actually a very reactive, aggressive puppy, which is like as a golden, and when I think of now, like she's the sweetest thing. But I had so many behavioral issues with her when she was a puppy. And I spent thousands and thousands on trainers, but the trainers didn't really like do like I feel like they weren't understanding the root of the, and I felt like if I would have had you, I would have had that bridge. And I'm very intuitive. And it was this whole thing. I was like, oh, I should have had you then, because then that would have been that perfect bridge of like, all right, it's not just about the treats and the toys and trying to like, the possession over this thing and blah, blah, blah. Like there would have been so much more ease. So I love that we're bringing this to the podcast and you're speaking about this. I'm even learning. I thought I didn't even think about that. Like I didn't even think about your ability to bridge that together, but also the importance about understanding their perspective and like what they can actually neurologically understand. Though I do think she does understand when I say come, because she'll come for my fiance. When it comes to me, she does not listen as well. So there's something there about, I don't know, she doesn't take me as seriously. There's something there.
Well, and it's really helpful too, because another thing that people don't realize is, I mean, we always participate in the behavior, right? Like it's impossible for us not to, whether it's not us understanding how to properly reinforce the boundaries that we're looking for them to adhere to, or the behavior that we're looking for them um, to display, but they mirror so much of our unconscious stuff that we project out. So there's a book called Your Dog is Your Mirror that was written by a dog trainer that is the most comprehensive book I have yet to read from a trainer's perspective. And he talks a lot about this. And when I found the book, I was like, oh my God, chef's kiss. Like, thank God somebody in the industry is speaking up about this in a way that is digestible for people and isn't so woo-woo, because I feel like people are more likely to take the information and say, okay, get this. But even with my animals, something my husband noticed when he would go out of town was that when he would come home, the dogs would lose their minds. Like they would bark, they heard the door open. But when I would leave and my husband was home alone, I would come home and the dogs were perfectly fine. Nobody barked. And he brought this up to me and he said, how fascinating is that? That when you leave and you come home, they bark, but with me, they're peaceful. And I was like, huh. I was like, okay, cool. All they're doing is showing me like where in my system, what energy am I projecting out that they're simply just mirroring back to me. And that's part of the sacred bond that we have with them, is that they come in to show us these pieces. And it's an invitation for us to go inside of ourselves to do some work and do some healing. And that for me was like, okay, how do I feel when I'm home alone and my husband's not here? Okay, I can definitely admit that there's some times that I don't feel secure and safe by myself, right?
Mm.
And so my animals are picking up on that and they're just mirroring that information back to me in their behavior. So that can always play a part too, that I think is really important in bringing them in on the conversation, because sometimes they can shed light on things that we're projecting out that we don't even realize.
That was actually going to be one of my big questions for you is like, is the mirror, a whole thing of like your pet is a mirror. How much of it is that like a direct where they're like always like a mirror versus maybe like autonomous to themselves? Because I think about, I mean, my dog will bark anyone walking through the door. I don't really feel like unsafe in the house, but if there's just a noise of someone opening the door, she'll bark. But how much of that is like a mirror because I may potentially feel not safe, and how much of that is her primal instinct as a dog? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so where's that line between mirror and them? Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And that's such a good question. I think that it's really important to acknowledge that we are sovereign beings and they are also sovereign beings. So, yes, they absolutely have their own experiences based on their history, their behaviors and habits, emotions, genetics, actually, especially within dog breeds. I think that that's really important, especially in the animal communication space. People will come to me with dog breeds that are really protective, like they have been genetically created for generations to protect, and they get this protective dog breed and they're like, well, why is my dog so protective all the time and it's inappropriate? And I'm like, well, there is an element of genetics that we have to acknowledge, right? Some of them have different needs. And I always actually look inside anyway. So even when my animal's displaying something, I always do a self check. And it's not a really deep one. It doesn't need to be a, oh my gosh, what am I doing to create this? Right? It doesn't need to be a deep dive of shadow work all of a sudden that you have with your animal relationships. But there is usually something going on in my system that is at least contributing. Whether it is, I'm not upholding the boundary, right? So I have a livestock guardian dog mix, and his first thing is that he goes out, he patrols the yard, and he barks. And we've actually been working on this because this is a new thing since we moved to our new house. And I've had to have conversations with him like, thank you. I totally understand that's your breed and genetics. We're going to start to create new habits so that you don't feel that that is your responsibility to patrol the property, because it's actually my job to keep you safe, not the other way around, right? So there's still things and actions that take place between us in our relationship that are important for us to take responsibility in, and also acknowledge that they do have their own experiences. But I've had really wild things happen even with my own horses when we haven't been together. So energetically, we're so connected and we're so tied. And that's probably why you're feeling the nudge to the horses, because they're so magical in so many ways. But one of my horses in particular is like my heart horse. He's my bud. And years ago, he got a really bad case of ulcers, like so bad that he was in the hospital, the equine hospital, for a week, which is really rare. And when I was chatting with the vet about it, and I was much younger at this time, but I was chatting with the vet about it, and even he was stumped, and he was like, "What is the deal here? Is he not a pasture horse?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "So what has he got to be so stressed out about?" He's getting 24/7 access to feed, which is actually usually a big proponent with horses and ulcers, is that they don't have access to feed as much as they should, and stress. And there's none of those things happening and playing a part. And so, boom, invitation for me to say, okay, in what ways he feeling something from me? And ironically enough, that was a time in my life I had the worst acid reflux I've ever had. I was on a prescription from my doctor, and I had gone to the Instacare twice because of personal things that were going on for me in my life. And so in hindsight, I look back at that situation and I'm like, oh my gosh, like he was way too connected. He was feeling a lot of the things that I was, and he had manifested a very similar medical diagnosis that I was experiencing in that time as well.
I love that you're sharing all this and that, because it's not even like you're so connected to the horse, even though the horse isn't like in your physical house, but there's still that connection. Even about the dog and like the protection. We just moved actually 2 weeks ago, and Akasha, well, I just noticed in general, she's a bit more like the slightest noise of me putting a water ball down the desk, she's more reactive. She'll start barking because she thinks it's a noise. And I'm trying to like stabilize her more. Even the first few nights, was not sleeping, could not settle. And I know it's because she felt the lack of stabilization. And as soon as I stabilized and I was like, you're safe, we're not leaving, I'm here, I'm anchored, she actually like I noticed that. I was like, oh, and so when I dropped in, she dropped in. She was like, she felt safer. Not that I felt safe, but moving and just it's a
Yeah.
different environment. And as soon as I like directed and like connected that energy to her, she's like settling now more and more into like the new house and the new space. So
That is
I don't know.
so beautiful. What a juicy awareness too. That's so incredible. I love that.
Well, there's like, you gotta be up. Like I knew she wasn't. Well, the intuitive though. I guess the pet communicator, animal
Yep.
communicator in me. So about the mirrors, just for everyone listening too, is the mirror always reflecting, like from your perspective, the exact thing? Like with you in the horse example, like it was referring back the exact. When I think about an example, I think about the fact that Akasha is very needy. Like she's a very like loves a lot of pets, like pets and pets. And she's not a food motivated dog; she's a pets motivated dog. But whether that's me or whether that's anyone, she just wants pets. Right now, I'm like, I give you so much love, but like, so is it reflecting back in me that like I actually want more pets? Like, do you know? So how does one differentiate that between? Is it reflecting back something to me? Is she trying to give me more love by like asking for more? Does that make sense? So like, how would one read situations like this for someone at home?
Okay, that's such a great question. I do think it depends on the history of the dog, especially for dogs and cats, right? So if I'm working with a rescue, I'm going to have a different approach as to someone that I'm working with who, has had the dog since 8 weeks old. They still also have a history prior to that 8 week mark where they're moving into their new forever home for the rest of their lives. I have had plenty of situations and incidents where dogs have brought up when they've been with their mother and even the trauma of being split up from their other siblings and different things like that have created emotional issues and turbulence in their system later in life. So there is an acknowledgement that we have to have in that is not 100% our responsibility, right? We didn't create that ourselves. And when I have rescues, um, again, their history is going to play a huge part in how they decide to show up in their new home. But it doesn't mean that the owner can't and does not influence and help them. So, what I find with rescues is very different than how I handle things in other situations because oftentimes when people approach a rescued animal or they adopt one, we accidentally perpetuate their history. I see this all the
Mm,
time. I've also been guilty of this before I got into this work, right? Like, oh, I got my dog. She was abandoned outside for such a long time and blah, blah, blah. She's been through all these things. And it's like we start to recite all these things, even when we don't know it. People
mm,
automatically assume rescued animals have been through a lot of trauma. We introduce them to other people that way. And animals they don't like that. So what's happening behind the scenes there is that we're sort of projecting this disempowered energy
mhm,
their direction when we introduce them that way, when we perpetuate that, when we talk about it. Versus if we were to change our tune and introduce them as like, hey, this is Ginger. She's new to me and she's so happy, healthy, and whole now in her new surroundings. And oh my gosh, look at the transformation she's had even in just a short amount of time. Right? Like that completely changes the energetic dynamic and the energy that we're projecting there. And it's perpetuating a sense of empowerment versus disempowerment. So I think that is a really important key piece
mhm.
when it comes to our responsibility and how we help support them in their environment and their relationships and how they get to show up. But the other piece here is that, again, no matter what, I'm still always going to look a little bit inwards, even if it's like, hey, we have a situation here with this dog. Um, there's actually a dog trainer one time that said, needy owners have needy dogs. And I was
Oh yeah,
like,
I've heard that. I'm like, when she's being needy, I'm like, let me tell you, I am not needy. So normally she's being needy, where I'm like, can we not be needy at this point?
yeah, I don't completely agree with it. I don't think that,
Mm,
I mean, I will never make a broad generalization about anything with animals, right? I'll
yeah.
never say that one size fits all when it comes to theories. And when I heard that, I was like, oh man, my border collie livestock guardian mix is very needy. And I did not consider myself a needy person. And so I started noticing how I was interacting with him. And I was like, oh, I am absolutely it's like, even when we're using them for comfort, right? It's like, oh, we've had a bad day. I'm going to go hug my dog. I'm going to go like, oh, yes, now I feel so much better after smothering him for a few minutes. Like, boom, I was a little bit needy there in that moment. And how often throughout the day am I doing that unconsciously that is actually, again, perpetuating that sort of neediness that he has in his system And my husband's not that way. So like I'm definitely the more needy one at home with our animals, and I have to be super aware of that, especially with him. But my husband is the opposite. Like he's so comfortable, so confident, and that actually shows up in their relationship. And Vern, this dog I'm talking about, listens to Rob way better, and he feels way more secure with him. Whereas with me, he's more likely to push the boundaries, not listen, and yada, 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 because my energy is not as structured and sturdy as Rob's is. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like it does bring there's a beautiful yin and yang element inside of our home. I'm more nurturing, right? More feminine, a female. And my husband is more structured, more masculine, and he brings in the play. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It's just something sometimes for us to be aware of. And sometimes again, we don't even know when that energy is being produced and sent out.
That's so interesting you say that too. I mean, I do find Akash is needy with me and my fiance, but when you're saying about even the comfort of the love, I find even maybe it's I think it's called cuteness aggression. Like I was mother, I'm like, you
Yes.
were the cutest thing. Like she's a golden retriever. I mean, how like and so it's not even necessarily like I've had a bad day or I need comfort, but I just maybe it's the cuteness aggression that's
Yes.
now you're saying like contributing to the need because I pour so much of that then her system needs that constantly or like needs more of that because I've regulated her with those bursts of like, but how like I just smush her face into my face. That's such a like a light bulb moment for me. Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating too, because again, especially for those of you who listen to this, um, there's nothing wrong with cuteness aggression, in my opinion. And also, I'm not a dog trainer. So I always tell people, like, take my opinion, and that's not my lane of expertise. So go chat with a trainer. But it was interesting because when we brought in a dog trainer for Vern that specialized more in his sort of working breed type mentality. And her first thing to me was, when I bring him home to you, don't acknowledge him right away. And I was like, what? Because I'm ready to, of course, like run to the van and be like, oh my God, I missed you. Right? And she was like, be calm. Don't acknowledge him right away. And now that we've actually been practicing some of those things at home, I'm like, oh, this totally makes sense. It doesn't mean I don't get to love bomb him, right? But I have learned through working with a trainer, as well as noticing my own pieces inside of our relationship intuitively, that the more centered I am, the more centered he is. And it actually reinforces his own sense of stability and confidence that he doesn't need me. Does that make sense?
Oh, 1,000%. I'm nodding because I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably be better when I get home. Not, hi, boo boo, want to give hugs, and she's jumping and she's putting her paws up and giving me hugs. I'm like, hugs. And I'm like, I know I should be like, I remember hearing us like, be calm, go settle, like put your stuff away, sit, and then calmly say, I want to work with that. So
Girl, me too. It's all good.
for people at home, whether they have like cats or dogs or horses or whatever kind of animal, what would you say is like the first thing in terms of opening themselves up to be able to communicate more? Is it just like even maybe dropping into presence or stillness or like letting there be space and like trusting the nudge that comes through for them, or if they get like a feeling? I think I've even saw one of your reels that like, oh, even the ping, like do they need to go out, or like that's even a representation of communication. They may not even be aware if they're already communicating. But like how can people start to like be more telepathic with their pets?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, first and foremost, recognize that you're already doing it. You just probably are not aware. The trouble with us trying to communicate and practice with our own animals is that we're already so naturally connected with them. And that relationship and the telepathic pathway has already been opened up for however long you've had them, and potentially even before. Like our soul recognizes them. I'm sure everyone can agree to this. When you found your pet, your animal, and you're like, oh, there's this sense of recognition and this sense of knowing that they're yours, right? And it's because your soul's on a more etheric scale decided to create a soul contract to come together in this lifetime at exactly precisely that time and go through whatever adventure it is you're supposed to go through. So the relationship is so natural. In fact, when we teach people how to communicate with animals, I assign them my animals for weeks and weeks and weeks. because they're way more likely to gain confidence in their skill when they realize they're picking up information about an animal that's a complete stranger to them that they couldn't possibly know because they didn't share it, right? So that allows you to start to recognize how your senses are working, how your body is taking in valid information, and from there you can build. That being said, with people who are working on this organically at home with their own pets, I tell them to look for the random moments. Like you're typing on your
Mhm.
keyboard and you're following up with an email, and yeah, you get this hit of like, oh, my dog needs to go out, or oh, I'm going to take a break and go take them on a walk. Oftentimes, these little random hits we think we're getting and we think we're coming up with ideas for are them sharing that information with us, and we're picking up on it and we're just mistaking it for our own thought. In fact, classic at home, both with my dogs and my horses, if I like tell them we're going to go on a walk and at home, I'll get you a treat or whatever, and I forget, all of a sudden I'll get this little ping of like, hey, the treat. I'm like, oh my God, I totally forgot about that. That's not me. That's me picking it up from them. And sometimes I don't even know from which dog, right? Because the energetic information can come in and sort of feel like almost static interference telepathically. And we don't always know exactly where that message came through. Now, I can go look at them and say, okay, who said it, right? And figure that out. But that would be my biggest thing. The other thing on our end that we can help them with is sharing with them the thing that we want versus the thing that we don't want. And this is because
Mm.
so our intuition comes through the unconscious level, right? And our unconscious mind does not immediately process negatives. So if I tell you don't think about a blue tree, you're probably automatically going to think about a blue tree. So when we are telling our animals, don't do XYZ, our unconscious mind is automatically sending that data energetically and sometimes even a picture of the thing we don't want them to do. And then they are more likely to do it. And they're like confused because they're like, well, wait a second, your verbal and your energetic cues didn't match, they didn't align. Right. So it's really confusing for them. So we want to talk about things in the way of like, hey, here's the behavior I do want you to do. So instead of don't jump on the couch, I would say practice staying on the floor, or keep
Mm.
yourself over in this portion of the room, or keep all four paws on the ground when you greet people instead of saying don't jump on people, right? Those types of things can be really helpful.
Oh, I'm now going to stop saying no jumping and keep all four paws. But that makes so much sense. Even with the communication, I'm curious because to me, and maybe this might vary from person to person, but I feel like Akasha, in terms of her understanding, it goes way beyond basic like commands. Does that make sense? Like I feel like she has the intellect level of like capacity that I would talk to as like a human as me. Like to me, she's a human. I mean, she even sometimes gets between my fiance and I, like when we're sleeping, and she thinks she's a human. She's on her back, paws up between us, like she's in there, like she's a human. Would you say like you agree with that? Is that like a byproduct by age? Like when you feel like they're behaving, you're getting senses, do you feel like you're just talking to like a coherent adult? Does that make sense in terms of like
Yeah.
they're not thinking like I want treat. They're actually thinking like I would like does that make sense? Yeah, I think you're
Yes,
not. Okay.
totally does. Yes. They're way more fluent in communication than we realize, and they
Mhm.
understand way more things than we realize. God forbid. There was one reel I did forever ago. I can't even remember how long ago this was. And a dog had an understanding of the internet and said, I can't even remember this reel. Okay, so my apologies. Somebody's going to probably fact check this because they're going to go find it. But I can't remember what it was. The dog made a joke about one of the other animals in the home riding him with like a saddle or something, and was making a joke like do a video or do a funny picture about it and then post it on the internet. And because the dog had an understanding that the parent would post pictures of the dog on the internet and that people would energetically pay attention to him and compliment him and that he was sort of popular. And I will never forget the troll comments on there like, how does a dog know how the internet works? I'm like, cool, do you actually know how the internet works? No, I don't. Like, I have absolutely no idea, like, scientifically how the internet works, but I know that it does, right?
Mhm.
And I know that what we utilize it for. So, animals are very similar in that sense that they can comprehend so many things based on how we talk about it, the information that we're accidentally sending them that we don't even realize. Um, they bring up intricacies in relationships inside the home all the time. Dogs, of course, will also talk about And this is always a very sensitive subject that I'm super cautious of. But dogs will also talk about pregnancies, like, hey, my mom's pregnant and the owner hadn't told me that yet. I mean, they pick up on
Mhm.
just an insane amount of information. And they're so in touch with their intuitive senses, it's bananas. So the ethereal wisdom that comes through them is just mind blowing to me every time.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think they know just as much, if not more. Both times I was pregnant, Akasha knew before I did. She'd come and she started putting her head on my belly, and I didn't know. A friend, before she knew she was even pregnant, did the same to her. So like, I think they not only know what we say, but like they also know things that we aren't fully aware of yet, like those maybe bigger things, or not like, I guess, premonitions, but like future, you get what I mean? Like those types of those things that, yeah, we don't, they
I
just
think
have
that's part
senses.
Yes, and I think that's part of the beautiful cohesiveness within the relationship dynamic that we get to have, that they're sort of the yin to our yang, right? Humans are so super logical. We are constantly thinking about the past, we're constantly thinking about the future, or it's like our brains are in a million directions at all times, and animals are so in their soul body. It's like their soul essence is not encumbered by, like, pardon my French, can I swear on here?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. About the bullshit that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're not thinking about the grocery store, they're not thinking about their boss at work. They're so present in their body, they're so present in their senses and the things that are happening in their environment at that moment, and it allows them to tap into intuitive spaces that we just don't allow ourselves to have access to, especially at every given moment of every day. And I always tell people, I'm like, they're arguably way more evolved than us in other areas. Like,
Yeah.
they don't think about death the same way. They don't think about birth the same way. I've had the most beautiful experiences with animals, even talking about how the circle of life happens and how they view that differently than we do. And it's really actually blown my world open. Like, the things that I thought I believed going into animal communication are not nearly the same 5 years later.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. Cause I sometimes think about, I'm like, what does Akasha think about all day? Like, it can't just be food and when my next walk is. I'm like, she sleeps. Like, what are you thinking about? Do you know what I mean? But maybe she's thinking about how the circle of life actually works.
And
So,
granted, like, there are plenty of animals that talk to me and are like, oh, I'm watching. Like, I actually did a session yesterday with a repeat client of mine, and he has these huge windows. He's in this super tall apartment. I don't even know how many floors up. And every single time I open up a session with him, he's like, my windows. Because to him, he sits and watches life happen outside of his windows, and it's like a movie to him. Like, he
mhm.
just loves it. So every animal is going to be a little bit different, a little bit more unique in what their interests are, and it's definitely not species specific. I've talked to really, really smart chickens and some dogs that are a little bit more simple in nature and don't go down really methodical rabbit holes. It's just not what they're here to do.
Oh, I love that you bring that. And I think that's so true. I think maybe sometimes someone might think like a chicken isn't like as, but to me, no, it could be any animal, anytime. I mean, I've had experiences with squirrels, so I can't even like imagine what people can have with whatever kind of like pet or animal. So for you, I mean, when you're walking down the street, are you like picking up, like, if you look at a random dog in the street, do you like pick up information, or you like know something of like, does that make sense? Like, I feel
Yes.
like if I was so in tune with animals, any animal I'd see, I'd probably instantly feel them. Or is that something for you, like, you close and open to more like, so you don't get bombarded by, dogs on the street who, you don't need to be, perhaps?
Yeah, good question. This is actually one of the very, very first things that we teach our communicators how to do once they start to open up that channel, is learning how to have boundaries on when it's turned on and when it's turned off, because otherwise it would be really overwhelming, for one, and two, ethically, to me, it's inappropriate to be
Hmm.
constantly communicating with animals that you haven't gotten permission to. And you can sometimes accidentally, like, tap into a line, which they would not let you in if they didn't want you in. So that's the other thing to note here, is animals are way better about their energetic and intuitive boundaries than we are. Like, otherwise they'd make really horrible predators, right? Like,
Yeah.
so they're really, really good about that. But there have absolutely been times that I have been out. In fact, one of the first reels on my TikTok that took off was about me accidentally tapping into a dog who would, like, gotten mad at his mom because she was mad at him because he was barking at the fire truck that went down. And he turned around and looked at her and was like, why? It's barking at me. And here I am in the dog park, like laughing hysterically to myself in the corner, and nobody knows why. So
It's funny.
but so like accidental connections can happen, but it's important, ethically speaking, that when they do happen, I close it off. I always do it in a really soft and kind way, especially if they're trying to communicate with me about something. But permission to me is really important. Consent is extremely important. I'm not going to have a full-fledged conversation with somebody's dog who's sitting at the vet's office if their owner doesn't know that I'm doing that, right? So that's an important key piece. And with wildlife, of course, there's no caretaker, so it just would be the consent and permission from them specifically.
Well, if Akasha ever gives you a message, just know you have my undisclosed permission at all times. You have a permanent open door if she ever wants to say anything.
I love that.
What do you feel is either like a myth or something that like bugs you or pisses you off about like animal communication that either people like get wrong or they just don't fully understand? Like, oh, I wish people understood this about animal communication, or this really bugs me, or that's not true.
The behavioral one for me is my top one, right? Just because we ask doesn't mean they can or that they will. But my second one after that, since we already covered that, is names or spelling or something to do with like the English language. It drives me bananas. Like,
Really?
so people will ask me like, what is a key word or a name that we call them? It's like they're trying to test the communicator, which I just don't love that energy anyway, because I'm like, if we don't have
Oh, okay. So
trust and
someone's
rapport, what are we
testing you.
doing?
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And the test isn't, it's whatever, not my favorite type of person to work with, right? Because I prefer people who have trust in the process. And also, their participation is really important, because if they don't trust me and they don't have full participation in the process, again, their animal trusts them, right? So, how do you think they're actually going to show up with me inside of the session? Like, they're going to
Yeah.
mirror what you're doing. So, we're not going to get the value out of this that you think you're seeking. But,
Yeah.
anywho, sometimes people will say something like, hey, there's a nickname that we give the dog at home that we want to see if you can pick up on it. And if you can, then I'm in. Then I get it. Then I'm a believer, right? Or hey, we have a keyword that I told my dog that if they ever talk to an animal psychic, that if they pick this up, then I'll believe it. I'll know that it's legit. And people understandably just don't understand the process. But what's happening is, again, this is an energetic piece of information. Energy is not based on the English language. I'm sorry to tell you. Like, it's not based on ACBD, blah, blah, blah. So we have energy and information. This data that comes through is what we call a thought form. So a thought form is essentially like a little bubble. You can think of it like programmed with thoughts, words, feelings, and essentially a picture of what it is that is abstractly trying to come through this channel. So it goes beyond language. It has nothing to do with language. And when we get that piece of information, it doesn't all of a sudden form in our mind into A, B, C, D, right? Again, the construct of an English language or whatever language is out there. That's not how energy works. While we can sometimes pick up key phrases on accident when we're in a really deep state of trance, but when you're caught off guard with something like that, it can pull you out. So, an animal communicator and any type of intuitive is typically going to be in some sort of state of trance when they're channeling. This allows their conscious mind to take a backseat, their unconscious mind to be fully available for the incoming information. It's the best way for us to get really raw data without our filters coming into play. We're also still human. So, I'm going to tell you that there's no psychic on the planet that is going to be 100% accurate 100% of the time. It's literally impossible because we cannot get rid of our conscious mind, right? So it is important for us to discern and learn how to translate that info and be hyper aware of when our own filters and biases are coming in. But because of that operating mechanism, if somebody says to a psychic or, an intuitive interpreter of any kind, like, come up with this word, it will probably pull them out of trance a little bit. And it's not going to allow them to deepen their practice enough to receive the word, because words are hard to begin with. This is also why I tell people when they're coming through my program, because they'll be like, oh, well, this dog kept saying Beth, Beth, Beth. And I'm like, Beth could mean something, and it also might mean nothing, right? Because again, names and like structured words like that in an energetic communication space are not nearly as reliable as when we're getting multiple pieces of data through different avenues and putting it together to create a fuller picture. Does that make sense? Did I answer that?
100%. I'm just
Okay.
flabbergasted that anybody would sit there and like quiz you about the
Yeah.
name. I would be like, bye. Like, as someone who used to like read Akashic Records, I'd be like, okay, bye. Like, this is
Yeah.
not free. I can't believe that. And actually, this is funny. Maybe it was last week through like the scrolling reels, I saw someone whisper to a cat, like, if you can understand me, like, send me a message about balloons. And then it goes to like someone, an animal communicator, and they're on Zoom, and the person happens to like mention balloons. But I'm also thinking, like, A, that's cool. But B, it might have come through in a way that they maybe were showing balloons that didn't
Totally.
look like it was balloons because it wasn't the actual word balloons. And then someone might think, oh, they're not understanding me. But like you said, it's not a translation of like balloons to balloons. It could be showing like a round ball, and that like they didn't say balloon, but that round ball to that person was maybe picking up on the balloons. Kind of like you said, it's not necessarily like the word for word of the language. And so that's also not a good metric to use because you might not even get that, but you actually are getting the answer that you want. Is just not packaged the way you think you need to receive it.
Exactly. Because I could tell a cat, hey, send my partner this picture of these balloons. Like, we'll know that we're good to go when these picture of the balloons come in. But then if I'm working with an animal communicator who's not a visual person at all, that information could potentially get filtered and repackaged in a totally different way. And it doesn't mean that it didn't come through. It just means that it just got shifted and molded and changed a bit because again, energetically, you're absolutely right. It's not like me handing you a literal piece of paper and you opening it and reading what's on there, right? It's like we're taking a piece of paper, it's getting mushed and smushed and like interpreted and energetically smoothed over to get repackaged in a completely different way. And that's going to be up to how the person on the other end best receives information. And again, it doesn't mean people can't get really specific in their
Yeah.
skills, but we're not going to have mind blowing moments every 2 seconds.
So when you're helping people communicate with pets, do you find people are coming to you to learn how to communicate with their own pets? Or are they like coming to you to learn how to communicate with animals to be someone who also communicates with animals? Or maybe like, is it 50-50? Like, do you say people sometimes just join because they're like, oh, I just really want to learn for myself how to communicate with animals?
You want to know what's so funny about this that I think is also just like the juiciest piece of teaching is that more often than not, people don't know why they joined. So when we
Mm,
ask them, like, yeah, it's so good because they're like, I don't know, I'm not even sure that I can do this, but I think it would be cool. I always hear that. I think it would be cool to talk with my own pets and like maybe make a career out of it. But more often than not, there's just this like people report that there's just this soul calling. It's like this nudge that they got and they couldn't say no and they wanted to come in. And what I find that's so beautiful through this process is that people think they're coming in to chat with animals, but what's really happening is that animals are simply mirroring this sacred opportunity to open up our channel and remember that we are here co-creating as source, not with source. And it's like the sacred invitation back home, right? And animals are already there. Like, that's why we're so drawn to them. That's why we want them in our space. And it's like we see that, we want that frequency, and we want to reawaken that within ourselves. And that is the part about the process that is my favorite because we always joke that it's the gateway drug back to yourself.
I love that you said that. I mean, obviously, this is why I had you on the podcast. I didn't even know how like in tune we're like, yes, bring you back home. We are speaking the same language. So I love that you said that. It's like a different way that you're coming to that realization. You're coming through it through animals. And that's beautiful. That's incredible.
Yeah. And of course, there are logistical things that are always fun, but
Yeah. Amazing. I
but
love
that
that.
part of the process is the best.
Is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with when it comes to communicating with animals, pet communications, what you think people should know? Any last things to leave us with?
Yeah, I would love to share with people to trust your heart on whatever you think you're receiving from your babies around you. Also, trust your heart in the relationships that you have, that there's absolutely no coincidence, the relationship and the ownership or the companionship of exactly the animal that came into your space. And I also want to share that if any of you have ever had the challenging decision to have to rehome an animal, that sometimes rehoming an animal is the best, most sacred thing for both of you. I think that there's a really big negative connotation in the world about that. And I do think that there are folks that, I wish were more responsible. And rehoming an animal is sometimes part of their sacred contract and their sacred space and journey to take them exactly where they're supposed to be. So if any of you are hurting from any type of decision like that, just know that you're not alone and they're going to be okay. The other thing that I want to share is that if you just lost a pet or you are in grief from a pet, please know that as much as they supported you here on earth, it is tenfold on the other side, and they're very much still around. They don't go anywhere. But yeah, otherwise
I
keep
had
that heart
chills
open.
from the top of my head down to my toes, like full body, the biggest goosebump when you're talking about rehoming. I was like, this feels so important. That was for at least one person. Like that was for, and you're right about the negative. People always like demonize people who are doing it or look at them badly, but like that could actually be the most sacred thing, like
Yeah.
for that animal, for that person, for both. And maybe they were just like supposed to be in your life, in your home for that short amount of time, and then they have to move on. But I also feel like with you or like even someone you train, there can be a lot of peace in maybe someone who feels like they can't intuitively themselves come to that conclusion. If you feel like you're contemplating that decision, and I'm not saying you would ever like tap and be like, yes, you need to rehome, you would never like say anything definitive like that, but just giving them a little bit more peace and solidity for them to make that own decision, and or like before or after, to give them peace. And then also sometimes if they've just passed, you need just someone else to like trust that like, oh yes, you're probably getting visited, you're probably getting like nudges that they're still with you, but just even that peace and that comfort of having someone, I think, like attach the link a little bit that you forgot you could attach. That's so beautiful what you just shared.
I actually wasn't talking or planning on talking about rehoming at all, but it just dropped in. I was like, okay, someone needs to hear this.
And actually one thing maybe you'll probably agree with me is I think also I don't think animal communication always has to be like something is wrong or bad, or like I'm trying to figure out why you're doing this behavior, or I'm trying to make you do this. Like to me, maybe I'm just me. I have like conversations with Akasha where we're like laughing and joking and we're playing. Like to me, I think also people should think about animal communication is not like, okay, I'm sitting down to figure out what's wrong or to fix something, but it's also you can just communicate with animals as a part of like building your relationship and having humor. It's like,
Yes.
would you only talk to your partner when something's wrong or needs to be fixed? Like obviously not. And they are relationships that we have in our world. And sometimes, they live with us. They're major relationships. They're maybe like mini children to some of us, right? So I think it's also we can have light when it comes to communication. It's not always, oh, something needs to be fixed or something's wrong, or I'm trying to correct a behavior of some kind.
It's always to create harmony and strengthen the bond. That's what it's for. That's the entire purpose of the session, is so that the owner leaves feeling that they are more connected with their animal, that they have a deeper understanding of them, their needs, who they are. And again, mostly the sacred relationship and bond that the two of them have together, and that the animal also feels heard. Most of my repeat clients don't come to me because some big new life thing has happened. They come to me because it's like, cool, it's maintenance time. Let's check in and see how things are going. And it's just fun and light and fluffy. And I love those. I love it.
You're really piquing my interest. I'm like, I really wonder what Akashi was saying when he said. I
Anytime,
think she'd be a
anytime.
little sassy, a little like you're piquing my interest. So obviously we're gonna leave your links down in the description box because everyone needs to go like find you. Maybe someone's feeling the pull to learn how to do it themselves or for other people, but even just like learn all of your wisdom that you have in terms of communicating with pets and with animals. Because to me, they are, one of the most important relationships we have, and just as important as our like human to human relationships. So where can everyone find you? Let us know everything about you and how people can go deeper with you as well.
Absolutely. So I am most active on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at Pet Talk with Alex. And I do have a TikTok as well. Again, you're going to find me more active over on the IG space. But I do also have a book. In fact, it's really, really cheap on Kindle. I think I can't even remember, but it's like under $8. So, and in there, I give literally a deep dive into every single topic we covered today, plus a how to and self development tools so that you can clear up your channel and really start to work those intuitive senses in practice at home. So that's a very cost effective way for you to be able to start to take a deep dive. Otherwise, we do also have a 4-month immersive course called Animal Communication for Beginners, the Collective. And that's where we take you through step by step our process and give you access to weekly practice sessions with coaching and support.
Amazing. I didn't know you had a book. I'm gonna have to go like check this
Yeah.
out. I love learning about like new things, like pet communication. To me, like
Mhm.
diving deep on like micro topics is so interesting. So I'm gonna get that. All right, we will leave everything down below. Alex, thank you so much for your time, your magic, your wisdom, all that you are, and all that you're bringing to the world, and the impact you've had on every single person listening today. So thank you.
Thank you so much.